dimensions of the materiality of language and the transformation of discourse from one semiotic and material state to another through the use of transducers that are the core of all types of media technology. That is an ubiquitous phenomenon. But at the same time, such transduction is also the subject of complex social and cultural evaluations that closely tie to assumptions about the nature of the mediatic apparatus question. Now, having this in mind, today I address the issue of religious language with an emphasis on the voice dimensions and vocalization of religious discourse. So what I want to do is to pay attention to the ways in which discourse and settings take to be religious can shift between different modalities of materiality through the work of transducers. And such shifts in turn can also become central to the spiritual practices involved. I mean, the work of transducing discourse here is inseparable from religiously grounded notions about language, I suggest, especially the dimension of voice and its role in particular process of religious interaction and mediation. And I aim to show in this talk that transduction is not just an important issue for language-related issues of media anthropology in a narrow sense, that is the study of media practices in their social cultural context. But more broadly, I also think the question of materiality of language is intrinsically tied to the issue of transduction, because the latter enables actually the social circulation of discourse. Now, this talk is about Mauritian Muslims, and among Mauritian Muslims, Mauritius, just to introduce you, is an island nation in the ocean, has 1.2 million inhabitants, and about almost 70% of the population is originally from India. More than half of the total population is Hindu, and the remainder of the Indo-Mauritians are Muslim, who are about 17% of the population, and then they are also a quarter of the population is of African descent, people who came through slavery on the island, and they are small but economically very important Franco-Mauritian communities and Chinese communities. The Franco-Mauritians are a tiny number, but they're very important because they're descendants of the original settlers of the island who actually still dominate the economy. Now among Mauritian Muslims, Naat is a popular genre of devotional poetry in honor of the Prophet Muhammad. It's actually an Arabic word that has been introduced into Urdu, which means as much as qualification or description. And these are verses and hymns of praise performed at important dates in the Islamic ritual calendar, as well as auspicious events in people's lives. And its description qualification means that it's the description of the wonderful attributes of the Prophet Muhammad, and that's really extolling these virtues and these qualities in poetic terms. Now, the performance of this genre is really the central component of religious speech events known as Mehfil and Mulud that are held on such auspicious occasions. Now, Naat also has come to play an important role in sectarian differentiation among Mauritian Muslims. And as I said, the Mauritian Muslims are of Indian origin, and 17% of the population, but they're also quite heterogeneous in terms of their actual origins in India, their class position, but also in terms of sectarian affiliation. And the position of the genre in the production of sectarian differences is very similar to those found in South Asia. In Mauritius, these debates are actually connected to the questions of religious authority in a diasporic location. As the additional layer of authenticity and authorization that makes Mauritius special. So basically, you have the same debates about this genre, whether it's admissible or not, but these debates are then also refracted through this issue of diasporic authenticity in the way they would not be in India and Pakistan. Because, the question of religious authority in a diasporic location is really important for legitimizing Mauritian Muslims' place in the nation. Ever since independence in 1968, Mauritius has opted for a nation-building strategy, pursuing sidelining homogenizing tendencies, but officially emphasizing the origins of Mauritians in different parts of the world, instead in the vision of the nation as a diasporic mosaic. Now, devotional practices such as Naat have a double this discourse of official ancestral culture, the terms culture and religion are used interchangeably. Now, Mauritius never had a pre-colonial population, and strategy of nation building, again, is really this privileging these diasporic origins. And consequently, the origins of Mauritians and other parts of the world are officially highlighted, and membership in the nation is best demonstrated through cultivation of such diasporic ancestral culture. And for Muslims, Islamic traditions are simply officially recognized as the ancestral culture of Muslims. And thus the perceived authenticity of Islamic traditions pointing to origins and sources of authority outside Mauritius are of crucial importance in Mauritian multicultural politics. And therefore also the question of who speaks to authentic Islam in Mauritius. Now, on the other hand, Naat as a devotional genre is emblematic of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat, or which is also being known in India as the Bareilly tradition, and which probably still commands the following of most Mauritian Muslims, as well, and very importantly, of most Muslims in India and Pakistan to this day, but this is fast changing. And this is actually a reformist tradition, like several others. It originates in the second half of the 19th century as a response to colonial rule and the crushing of the remaining Muslim dynasties in the wake of the failed revolt against colonial rule in 1857. And it emerges in a late 19th century colonial context. In this tradition, actually, the Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat distinguishes itself through its synthesis of Sufism and ulama-based Islam. And therefore, it emphasizes practice of intercession, in which the Prophet or another Islamic authority, such as a major Sufi saint, is directly addressed for assistance and in order to accumulate spiritual merit, salah. Opponents of the Ahl Sunnah tradition, such as the more purist school of Deoband or the Salafi-oriented Al-Hadith, generally reject such practices, like Naat, arguing that they dilute the unicity of God and dangerously elevate human beings, such as the Prophet, next to him. As such, this practice of Naat has come to be contested, and its proponents, being part of an increasingly well-informed Muslim public in Mauritius, also increasingly well-informed Muslim public everywhere in the world, including India and Pakistan, have become ever more aware of the need to defend its legitimacy. And let me just show you this clip here of a performance. Where is that? I was able to pull this down. You see? Escape. Escape. And then this one, I have to do this a few times, I think. Here. Muslims often consider themselves as living on the periphery of the Muslim world and are especially mindful about the authenticity and legitimacy of their ritual practices in their diasporic context. And they are therefore especially concerned about the right texts to be recited and that they're composed by important scholar saints. But the textual content is not the only element that Muslims are mindful of in the recitation of Naat, because the performative dimensions are equally, if not more important. That is, in the eyes of those Mauritian Muslims in favor of cultivating Naat, the style and the vocalization of the recitation is of key significance for the practice to work as a means of spiritual intercession. And the aesthetic qualities of the performance, especially its vocal dimensions, are key to distinguishing a successful from a failed performance. And this concern about authentic Islamic practice in the diaspora also extends to the qualities of the reciting voice, which is a sensibility that can be traced to the paradigm of Quranic recitation. Let's go for it. But that's an image, and just direct from it? Okay. is the largest Islamic missionary movement in the world, has many millions of followers, and they are the ones who have really pushed back the Bareillis in India, Pakistan, and in the diaspora. They were founded in an area near Delhi in the 1930s, colonial India, and then came to Mauritius already in the 1950s. And then actually 10 years ago, you have these counter movement by this more Sufi-oriented transnational network. And what they do is actually propagating this particular genre. And they actually they have these green turbans, they are known as the Hari Pape Valley, the people of the green turban. And it's again a transnational missionary movement. Now, sound reproduction technologies. Here's a cover basically of a locally produced CD with a NAT. And actually all the performers are local Mauritians who've been trained by Indian or Pakistani imam in Mauritius. And yeah, copyright reserved, that doesn't really matter. It's really everywhere. It's really the commercial aspect of it is not very important because it's actually, this question was often asked to me when I was presenting this material, because it's not really something that you do in Mauritius, at least for money making. While it's in Pakistan, it's different. They're actually superstars of NAT reciters who actually make their living and by that. But it's not the case in Mauritius. And actually spreading it and copying it, multiplying is actually a religious and meritorious act. So it's actually good to do that. To infringe copyright is actually virtuous in that sense. So sound reproduction technologies, again, are widely regarded as a means to safeguard and transmit correct recitational style in a way that printed manuals of NAT text cannot. And the latter have long been circulating in Mauritius, I mean, for at least since the 1930s. Since the 1980s, however, the listening to first the cassette tapes, which I still encountered when I started doing fieldwork in the second half of the 90s in Mauritius, and then later audio CDs, now also sound files downloaded from the internet, have become very popular. Recordings of NAT performances by accomplished NAT Khan, that is performers of NAT from India, Pakistan, and also those of a few locally trained Mauritian NAT Khan, like those whose names you see on the CD cover, are widely treated as examples to emulate when people actually organize and hold mahfil and mulud, such as, for example, at their home on the occasion of a wedding. Now, my interlocutors in my fieldwork have often mentioned the model character of performative styles and vocal qualities of well-known NAT Khan when preparing for mahfil and mulud, on occasions such as, again, the Prophet's birthday or birth or death anniversaries of major Sufi saints, and then also private or family-related auspicious events. Now, in the next section, actually, I'm going to talk about the semiotic dimensions of this particular genre, but the point of the overall talk is that there's actually only one component. There's more to it. But let me deal from a linguistic anthropological perspective with the semiotic aspects of this performance. Now, here I have to say that the performance of NAT can be understood as a process of intertextualization, in which chunks of discourse are continuously lifted out of one context and reinserted in another. Now, this perspective stresses the processual nature of textuality as a constant alternation between de and recontextualization of discourse. In the performance of NAT, Mauritian Muslims appropriate texts from previous contexts of performance and reinsert them in the performative context at hand. Basically, it's an endless process. The goal, actually, in this performance of NAT is to reproduce tokens of type. And the type is actually, semiotically speaking, the authorized NAT genre in new performative contexts. So they can be recognized as replications of previous tokens, like performing the same NAT. And the tokens are felt to be the same relationship with the semiotic type, despite, of course, the fact that they always have an irreducible singularity at each performative event. And I think that there are 2 points in this process of intertextualization that are particularly important for the success of the performance. And first, the recontextualization of NAT involves a process of transposition. That's actually a technical term I'm going to explain. This means that the text is recontextualized in a way that is one chunk of discourse is lifted out of one context and put into another context in such a way that it points to the origins of the text in another context, elsewhere. And hereby, this results in an authorizing effect. And actually, the notion of transposition actually comes from the German linguist Karl Bühler. Who coined this term in the spatial and temporal setting. And the target text is basically what the text that is actually at hand in the performance right now, features actually numerous deictic markers that point to the projected context of composition, the poetry by revered saint scholars located in the past. Now, deictic markers are parts of language that refer to something, but they are radically dependent on the context in order to determine what they point to. And of course, and the main kinds of deictic markers we use in most languages are personal pronouns. When I say I refer to something different than when you say I. And or here or there or today and tomorrow and so on are always deictic markers because they point to something that's constantly shifting with context. Now, what are the deictic markers? And they point to this projected context of composition of poetry, which is thought to have been composed in the setting by a divinely inspired saint scholar, which is really the authorizing moment, and that is located in the past and somewhere else. Now, if you look at this particular text, these are primarily first-person personal deictics, where verb forms agreeing with them, personal pronouns, and temporal deictics, which are, for example, here, to go through the English translation, and it's basically, once more, the temporal deictic, and then all the first-person deictic particles, that is the I of the I of the text, basically the first-person singular, and the verb forms agree with it are just all marked. And in addition, there are numerous evidentials and locutives that have the effect of further personalizing the devotional discourse. For example, here in this Kia Batamu, that is, how should I say, basically is actually here on that particular slide, and that's actually evidential. It involves a kind of personal stance of evidentiality. And it indicates the stance of the poetry composing saint scholars and their religious authority, because it's supposed to be an expression from their perspective. But the crucial point is the following. At the same time, the deictics and other personalization markers of the text are ambiguous, because the texts are also often highly personal expressions of affection and attachment for the prophet, and are often also personally addressed to him, like this text. In the act of recitation in a Mulud, Mauritian performers also take personal responsibility for the discourse uttered. So basically, the I of the devotional discourse, therefore, simultaneously points to the person of the composer, the assumed context of origin, basically the text of origin, and his religious authority, as well as to the reciting performers in the Mauritian target context at hand. Right? So it's basically points in both directions. And that actually has implications, if you look at it from a technical term, in terms of participant roles, that they shift all the time. It's basically the question of who's the author, who's responsible for the discourse. And that's actually much more widely distributed. And it's something we do in everyday speak all the time, that we have various ways of indicating whether we are the author, we are responsible for something. When we, for example, we use reported speech, or we, for example, repeat another utterance in a parodic way, it's clear that we have a separation between my own voice and the voice I'm uttering. But also the two can be closely aligned. I mean, Erwin Goffman has really worked on this in Goffmanian terms. The performers of the text inhabit the participant roles of animators of the text, composed by scholar saints of a highly religious authority. And they are actually the latter inhabit the role of the composer or ghoster, inspired from ghostwriter. That's actually Goffman's term. But because the performers at hand also take personal responsibility for the devotional discourse, they also shift into the participant role of the sponsor or originator, who is held accountable for what is being said. We see an animator simply somebody like a secretary at a press conference, or somebody who's venture reputing something. It's clear that they are not reporting their own words, but they are issuing a communique, for example. But the sponsor is actually the person, let's say the President of the United States, who's not there, but in whose name this all happens. And then there are, of course, the people who actually, the composers who actually composed the text, who wrote that. They may also be somebody different. Or all the three roles are fused in a single person. It just depends on the context. Now, the replication of the deictic structure of the origin text in the target text, right, So it's the same dialectic structure of the text when they were said to have been uttered and composed in the original setting of composition by the divinely inspired saint scholars, and the dialectic structure of the target text of performance in Mauritius today or tonight is really the same. And that underlines, the effect is really that it underlines the personal commitment to the spiritual authority that the saint scholars stand for, which is also claimed by the Ahle Sunnah tradition. And this replication constitutes a diagrammatic enactment of the continuity of the spiritual tradition concerned, which the authentic and faithful transmission of devotional discourse plays a signal role. And that's actually a larger theme in Islamic traditions. It's really about aligning oneself with authorized religious discourse, such as the Sunnah, the tradition of the Prophet. And it's about safeguarding the transmission of religious discourse, Islamic discourse, through generations of scholars down to us. And it's about checking that chain of transmission, whether it's an authentic and faithful, unbroken link, right? And it's the same logic that is actually here behind this process of contextualization. Just to play another sound clip. Okay, so I don't need an image, so that I think we should be fine. Where's the mouse? Where? It's here and there. Okay, that's on again. Anyway, I wanted to play the sound clip, but it doesn't work. I always have that luck with technology. I work on media technology, but it really never works when I'm on the phone. But it doesn't matter. Okay. Yeah, maybe you can minimize this and then I can click the sound file. Okay. Yeah. I mean, basically
किस्मत में मेरी चैन से जीना लिख दे, डूबे न कभी मेरा सफीना लिख दे, जन्नत भी
transcription of a performance I witnessed, so it's actually not the same as the semi-commercial recording, but it's right, you can see. So it's basically the city of Medina, which was the favorite city of the Prophet, where his buried, is kind of a stock theme in art. It's kind of a metaphor that stands for the presence of the Prophet. And okay, now, another point here I wanted to make is that the qualitative regimentation of the recontextualized devotional discourse is significant, as it additionally reinforces the commitment to religious authority as well as the continuity of its tradition. And this concerns especially the vocalization of devotional discourse. And Mauritian Muslims consider qualities of the voice to be particularly important in the process of contextualizing art, which does not only revolve around the transmission and repetition of the correct text, that's important, but also around the reproduction of sonic tokens that in their perceived qualities conform to the desired and authorized generic types of art. My interlocutors frequently describe the highly valued emotional vocal tone stirring others as a clean, prop in the Mauritian Creole, and beautiful, joli, comes from the naturally comes from the heart of those who love the Prophet. The link my informants drew between perceived qualities of the voice and the vocalization of discourse, and a particular form of piety centered of being filled with love for the Prophet, illustrates a much more widespread phenomenon of linking qualities of the voice to subject positions and stances, described by linguistic anthropologists as voice registers. So registers are actually subtypes of language that are linked to particular personalities or types of persons or to particular stereotypic activities. So we talk about legalese, for example, in English, or Bürokratendeutsch in German, right? These are registers, and this is actually, it's not just grammar, morphology, and vocabulary that are part of can constitute a register, but actually qualities of the voice also can indicate particular subject positions and so on, often indicating affect and emotion. Now, the importance of this voice-induced stance of piety for Mauritian Muslims, following this Al-Sunnah tradition, explains the concern to preserve the singular qualities or tones, that is, iconic qualities in semiotic terms, of particular voices in the circulation and the textualization of Naat. This is in turn the chief reason for the eager adoption and domestication of sound reproduction technologies in the practice of Naat, I would say. Among Mauritian Muslims, the notion that sound reproduction technology, such as formerly audio cassettes and now audio CDs and MP3 files downloaded from the internet, are suited for safeguarding qualities of the voice, is very widespread. For many, such technologies have a unique quality and unique capacity for the maintenance of sonic tokens across a chain of performative events. And we this larger Islamic theme of safeguarding the authenticity and authority of a text from one and recontextualizing them in the right way. Now, authoritative recordings of Naat performances provide Mauritian Muslims who favor the cultivation of Naat with modules to emulate, not just in terms of textual authority, but also as far as performative and vocal style is concerned. And this concern is in overall consonance with the dominant Quranic paradigm in the Islamic traditions, according to which the recitation of scripture summons divine presence, whereas a consequence, the reciting voice is literally taken to be the site where God reveals himself. Right, here's actually, and since this is actually an Islamic tradition very much tied to traditions of Sufism, this is actually the tomb of a local saint from the 19th century Mauritius, Dargah. Very much looks like Dargahs in India and Pakistan. It's on the outskirts of the capital, Port Louis, on a big cemetery. Now, the mediated circulation of Naat with its sound reproduction assisted process of intextualization of the devotional discourse that I've just described demonstrates the importance of embodied linguistic practice for devotional life among Mauritian Muslims. But beyond this very general observation, the domestication of sound reproduction technologies into Mauritian Muslim religious practices raises the questions of the materiality of language in more specific ways. Above all, materiality appears as the issue of transduction from one semiotic and material state to another. And hereby I draw on the anthropologist Webb Keen's recent discussion of so-called spirit writing as a means of transducing discourse into different material modalities. Linguistic anthropologist Michael Silverstein has also used that notion, and more recently this has also been taken up in anthropological work on religion and media. Matthew Engelke from LSE has written a short piece of that. But my use of the term is often inspired by its long-standing currency in media studies, from the basic insight that the workings of media are based on the operation of transducers, that devices that convert variations of energy in a physical medium into corresponding variations in another physical medium. Now, and I think that in the performance of Naat, transduction appears to be relevant in at least two ways. First, the theme of qualitative integrity of discourse across different instances of contextualization of Naat that appears to be so important for indexing personal commitment to truth and continuity of the religious tradition question brings into play the position of vocal performance and writing, something I mentioned. The attraction of sound reproduction technologies relies on the perceived ability to faithfully reproduce sonic tokens that help to maintain the desired forms of vocalization of Naat and performance. And from the perspective of Mauritian Muslims who advocate that, writing cannot do this. And they have a preference for avoiding the transduction of the sonic dimensions of discourse to writing, as they consider the former as essential to the success of the performance. And such a transduction would reduce the vocal performance mainly to its textual content, this is insufficient for the task of religious mediation, intercession, aimed at in the performance of an art where one wants to get closer to a divinely inspired context. Now, again, there are these written collections of art that have long been in circulation, both in India and Pakistan, but writing should, from this perspective, only be used as an aid memoir only. And this is, of course, a very familiar theme in Islamic traditions, where the written version of the Quran is also only supposed to be used as an aid memoir, because the actual divine presence reveals itself through recitation. Otherwise, I mean, this text, the writing should be bypassed as much as possible in the process of transmission and textualization. Now, second, sound reproduction as a medium also involves the transduction of sound waves, that is, variations in air pressure, into a different semiotic and material modality. Jonathan Stern, just to quote him, has written this very important book on the cultural origins of sound reproduction. Modern technologies of sound reproduction use devices called transducers, which turn the sound into something else and something else back into sound. And all sound reproduction technologies work through the work of transducers. That is, the variations in air pressure comprising the sonic tokens of the vocal performances recorded are transduced into variations of electrical voltage or current by a microphone, then into a sequence of numbers, and eventually into tiny plastic bumps of different sizes on a CD. The latter are read by an optical device emitting electronic signals encoding the sequence of numbers, ones and zeros. And these signals in turn undergo a process of decoding in digital to analog conversion, producing variations of electrical current or voltage from whom a more or less accurate replication of a sonic token is reproduced. Now let us look at the latter sequence of transductions that enable the conversion of sound into variations of electrical voltage or current through a microphone, with an analog to digital converter transducing the electrical signal into sequences of zeros and ones, the latter's conversion to tiny plastic bumps on a polycarbonate disc, reflections of a laser beam reading the bumps whose modulations read off by a photodiode reveal the sequence of zeros and ones, and then again it's being converted back into variations of electricity that are finally turned into sound waves again. Basically, in sound waves I mean here differences in air pressure, or variations in air pressure. If we assume that in this case air is the medium of sound. Now we are confronted with a stunning complexity of material transformations that in turn depend on a large infrastructure of electricity generation and transport, institutions of knowledge production, manufacturing networks for all components of the technical system of sound reproduction that involve the use of audio CDs. Now, the question is here, how do these complex transductions from one material state to another feature in